So I'm going to try to be kind to Sweet Pretty Cure because I didn't care for it a ton. It was alright, but it was definitely not my favorite. Sweet Pretty Cure was probably the season that had the roughest start for me, aside from the first of the several seasons that I watched when I was first starting off, kind of getting into watching all of them. I think part of that had to do with the fact that I was knowingly starting a 50 episode anime season with the intention of watching all the way through it and every subsequent season after. And then once I've kind of got past that first hurdle, the rest of them weren't nearly as difficult to start, except except Sweet Pretty Cure. The first dozen or so episodes pit Hibiki and Kanade against each other as nigh mortal enemies from an unspoken slight they both experienced from the other. For what it's worth, I think having the Cures be opposed to one another, despite their obvious need to work together when transformed to actually fight, was a really interesting idea. I don't think I like how it was done here, but I like the concept a lot. I think that it provides an interesting point of tension, and obviously, with how the rest of the franchise works, they'll get over it eventually. But having two Cures who can't stand one another but still fight together because they have to is intriguing, but maybe a bit too complicated for what the show wants to handle. And I think that Sweet Pretty Cure kind of falls into that trap and trips over its feet a little bit in trying to do that. Because in those first several episodes, Hibiki and Kanade don't like each other, they don't get along, they don't want to cooperate until they are not even forced to, because for brief moments they will decide that they are best closest friends and work together and do their finishing move together and beat up the bad guys and everything's golden, and then go right back into fighting each other. And the pettiness with which they fight one another really kind of grated on me. I understand that they are, well, middle schoolers, so a pettiness and kind of nonsensical arguments are kind of to be expected, but it's also a television show. They don't need to be realistic, I suppose. And in some ways, the source of their argument is incredibly realistic, and in other ways, infuriates me to no end. The source of their beef that is, once they realized their betrayal of trust from one another was because when they said they wanted to meet each other outside the gate to the school on their first day, once they got to their junior high or middle school or whichever one it is, they never specified which gate, and thus both went to different locations. And it kind of drove me crazy that their visceral dislike of one another came from something so avoidable, whether it be that they set that before and said, hey, we're meeting at this specific gate, instead of what they did, or part of what they yelled at one another after, just because they were bickering constantly and they blamed one another constantly for ruining their friendship and betraying the other's trust. And it's like, oh, I saw you walking around with these people instead of meeting me at the gate that we never said which one we were going to. They knew what school they were going to. They knew the layout of the school. They knew they were multiple gates at the school. And it's just the fact that the entire basis of their disagreement for like 15 episodes is the fact that they just completely forgot to say what gate they were going to, and the fact that it never came up for an entire year, I believe we're told, that they had beef with one another, is kind of obnoxious. What's even worse than that, I think, is that the entire time that Hibiki and Kanade are fighting during the first several episodes, their individual friends or club members keep commenting that they look like such good friends and that they are so close to one another. These two girls are almost at each other's throats anytime they are forced to be in one another's vicinity, and openly despise one another and rebuke any claim of friendship constantly. Anyone insists that they're just like sisters, only closer, and there's not a bit of, I guess, self-awareness to anything that is going on in the relationships between these characters when this is happening, because it has been, according to the characters, quite a while since this disagreement started, and Hibiki and Kanade have disliked each other for that entire time, and everyone is so insistent that they are the closest of friends. This type of approach to side characters, whom I almost called NPCs while initially kind of writing this out, bothers me a lot in Sweet Pretty Cure. And I think that is honestly one of the weakest points of Sweet Pretty Cure, are the side characters. The two main side characters that Hibiki and Kanade each have, they both have their own little friend who's sort of the captain of the clubs. Hibiki has her sports girl, and Kanade has her chef baker woman, and they have a little bit going on with them, but like enough to keep them interesting as a side character for like the 4 episodes they show up in across the 50 episode run of the show. But other than that, there is almost nothing to a lot of the other side characters. And the problem with the side characters that I kind of feel like these few exemplify is pervasive throughout all of them. Anytime one of them has a thought about the sort of relationship between the characters, especially when it's Hibiki and Kanade, they are correct in their opinion, no matter what the character it applies to says, the entire way through the show. There are multiple episodes dedicated to the issues that Hibiki has with her family. Sweet Pretty Cure does a lot with family life throughout the series, and some of it they do well because there's a pretty good amount of found family that is nice between our cures, our melody, rhythm, and the other one's muse. And I'm going to see if I can try to remember. She's the orange one. I'm going to look it up because I cannot remember the other character's name. Oh, that's probably not a good thing that I didn't look it up before. I'm sure it's fine, right? Beat. Okay. I got Cure Beat and Cure Muse mixed up in my head. That's fine. Which I guess kind of tells you how much Cure Beat ends up doing throughout the course of the show, huh? Anyway, Hibiki has several episodes dedicated to the sort of issues she has with her family life, namely her father. Her mother is just out of town a lot. She's a world famous singer, so she travels the world and does some cool stuff singing here and there. Her father is a very eccentric, talented musician and primarily a conductor. And there are multiple instances where I just kind of want to throttle Hibiki's father. It's presented in such a way where it's very clear that he cares about Hibiki. And the manner in which he shows this is he will kind of just say something at her in another language, not to her, at her. It is very distinct, a difference between what he is saying and how he is saying it. And rather than elaborate on what it means, just kind of leaves and lets her mull that over, for better or for worse. Usually for worse. Of course, episodic nature of the show, she figures it out. She solves kind of whatever issue is plaguing her during that episode. And a lot of the episodes revolve around the cures themselves having some sort of personal issue, needing to solve that. Less so than other people having the sort of personal issues that need to be resolved, like several of the previous seasons have, which I don't mind that change, but it just kind of ends up making some of the character arcs, I use that term loosely, feel repetitive, because they do the same episode with Hibiki's father a couple of different times. and everybody's like, oh, you're so close to your dad. And she's like, no, I'm really not. And then at the end of the episode, everyone's like, yep, you're so close to your dad. And she's like, maybe I am close to my dad because you all told me I am. And I guess I'm not going to read any further into the fact that I really feel like he hasn't, been there for me. They have an entire partial episode or full episode dedicated to Kanade and Hibiki switching lives. Not literally, they just go to each other's houses and say, hey, family of my friend I knew for a long time and am now friends with again. Never mind the fact that we had beef for a year. We're cool, we're chill. We're going to do some little trading spaces on us. Is that cool? And they all say, yeah, that's awesome. And I like that element of it. I really like that they get to just kind of switch lives for a little bit to see how the other one lives, to experience the different home lives that they have. It's a really sweet and fun episode for Hibiki because she gets to go to Kanade's house and live with her very supportive bakery family. And they just hang out and have a good time and man the kitchen and the shop and all Pretty Cures know is have a season where one of the girls' family runs a bakery. But Hibiki has a lot of fun there. And Kanade doesn't have a lot of fun at Hibiki's house. Because Hibiki's dad is never home. When he is, he just he does the same thing to Kanade. He just says something at her and then leaves. And it gets to be a really nice moment for Kanade to talk over with Hummy, the funny little mascot fairy. I like Hummy a lot. I like Hummy a lot more than she probably deserves, but she's really good and really funny throughout the course of the show consistently. She's so stupid, parentheses, affectionate, big ol' hard eyes. She's so goofy. I like her a lot. But she gets to have a nice moment kind of with Hummy and with the little fairy tones, just kind of going over. Hibiki's kind of lonely because her mom is gone. Her dad is gone most of the time anyway, too. And she doesn't have any siblings. She's an only child there. And I don't know. I feel like the show doesn't do enough to point out that the characters can kind of have their own thoughts about relationships. Because anytime the relationships with other characters are brought up, it is somebody else dictating to them what their relationship with this person is. And almost every time, the character just has to go along with it. They do an episode where Hibiki doesn't really think she wants to learn the piano again. And everybody's like, no, but your dad plays the piano great. You should learn how to play the piano again. And that episode was on the edge for me. I was kind of mad about that one until we finally get to a point where she, aside from anyone else's prodding, just kind of decides that she wants to get good at piano because she wants to be able to make people smile and be happy with music, which is kind of the same thing as her dad's motivation. It's kind of the same thing her father wanted to teach her when he was basically not berating, but putting down her musical talents over the course of the show, saying that her ability to play instruments doesn't have any heart and that her instrument playing and piano playing specifically isn't good enough because it is lacking something. That's just kind of something that they gloss over for some reason. That kind of made me mad too, because we're all chill about it after Hibiki decides that she wants to play music to make people happy for her own sake. And then suddenly her dad's like, yeah, your music's good now. Great job, daughter. I've taught you well. I want to throttle this man. And I guess at that point, Siren is still a bad guy, and she disguises herself as Hibiki's mom and tries to sabotage everything, but they suss her out, and it's fine. Siren is also kind of an interesting point in the show, because this show goes through several phases of, we have our bad guy, and we know that there are more antagonists behind our current antagonist. There always is. But we have our bad guy, and they are evil. And then in the span of one episode, we find out the bad guy is actually being controlled by a different bad guy, and they're not actually evil, they're just possessed. And then once they break that possession, it's cool, they're normal now, and we're all best friends. They do that with Siren, And then they do that again with for most of the show, main antagonist, Mephisto. And it's a little funny that our antagonists and like protagonists, we have a supporting character named Aphrodite, and then our antagonist is Mephisto. They're just kind of pulling names from like mythologies and literature and then just running with it. Sure, why not? It's kind of funny. It doesn't do much for the show. There's no payoff to that, but it's fine. But Siren is evil the entire way through. We know that she and Hummy have a history together, and Siren cannot fucking stand Hummy at the current time. Oops, I shouldn't swear. But then all of a sudden we get the reveal that they're using the evil noise to make Siren evil. She wasn't bad before the noise got her, as opposed to the Noid, which was the Domino's antagonist. But we get that, and then they cure her, and then she's cool and good again. And she also becomes a Pretty Cure at the same time, because Siren gets to turn into a human, and she becomes Cure Beat. And they call her Ellen from then on, I guess. I think they could have kept calling her Siren, and I think she could have kept turning into a cat, but she doesn't. She's just kind of a guy from then on out. But Cure Beat's powers are cool. She's pretty good. She's very strong as a Pretty Cure. Probably stronger than Melody and Rhythm are off the rip. But Melody and Rhythm are still pretty powerful cures. They lack coordination for most of the show, but they have raw power that, kind of exceeds a little bit of the opening act Pretty Cure stuff, which is fine. Our power scaling is increasing in this series. Soon we will be able to fight Goku. And our fourth and final cure to join the ensemble is Cure Muse. For quite a while, Cure Muse is sort of a masked person. They are a masked rider running around the city. They are sort of a vigilante. They spend a couple episodes helping our protagonists, and then they will just all of a sudden jump in, beat them, or prevent them from beating the bad guys, and then leave. And she's like, oh, I'm not helping anyone. I'm not allies with anyone. And they do kind of a mystery to it, where she's playing both sides. They're not sure where her allegiances lie. They're not sure what she's after. But once they actually get to the reveal that Muse is Mephisto's daughter, they then immediately drop it. I guess at that point, the reveal has come. They understand why she has been fighting back against them, and why she hasn't been, I guess, doing her Pretty Cure duty in beating the bad guys who are threatening the world, because the bad guys is her father. But I feel like the manner in which they do it is a little clunky. It's not bad. It's just okay, I guess. And that is also the point where we get the full reveal of Cure Muse. Masked Cure Muse is a completely different person than Cure Muse, in personality, in appearance, all of it. And then they break Mephisto out of his noise possession, and then he's cool also. And then our minor antagonists get to become major antagonists. And see, that's funny, because the good guys are from Major Land and the bad guys are from Minor Land. They're all musically themed. And this show actually does have a pretty good musical theming going on, even with some of the goofier stuff and less sensical connections in the kind of stuff. I mean, we got bass drum, baritone, and falsetto as our minor antagonists, who then get to become the major antagonists. But it's fine. It's fine. But I did kind of like the tease and build up to the reveal that Mephisto wasn't the actual final boss bad guy of the show. He, like Siren, is possessed by the noise. And we actually get several small moments of teasing and build up to this over the course of the show. It's here and there. It's a couple of episodes apart, but the moments that they have are kind of cool, because they address that the Pretty Cure are going into Major Land to try to find a artifact that is going to boost their power and give them more ways to fight. And the bad guys are like, oh, we gotta stop that. And Mephisto is really worried about this because he knows this is a powerful magical artifact, because he tried to go and get it when he was the king of Majorland before everything went bad for him. And he doesn't remember what happened when he went to get it. And they make a point of showing that he doesn't remember what happened. And they do small, like, breadcrumbs of that here and there over the course of a couple of episodes. And it's actually a really cool way for them to build to the reveal that Mephisto was actually possessed by Noise the whole time. And this evil Noise is, of course, our antagonist, Noise. That's the name of the main bad guy. His name is Noise. It's, you know, it's fine. It's a goofy name. It's just, I mean, I guess you can call your antagonist Noise. They have a movie antagonist that's something similar, but that's for a later video. But Noise was kind of cool. Noise is actually like a pretty intimidating antagonist over the course of the show. We get a lot of like background lore over this season that we don't get in other seasons. I didn't care for all of it, but what we did get was pretty fun, because Hibiki and Kanade like to hang out in an abandoned church, I guess, where this old guy like builds pianos and instruments and is building like a big old pipe organ the entire course of the show. And then pretty deep into it, after they free Mephisto's from his mind control, they get to go like, oh yeah, this old guy, he's his dad, and he was also from Majorland, and he was a hero who defeated Noise like 50 years ago because he's so cool and strong, but he's not as strong anymore because he's old. So he's building this pipe organ to beat Noise. And Noise is trying to revive himself so he can wipe out music or happiness or something, you know, as they are wont to do. But he has to destroy this pipe organ because the pipe organ will help get him beaten. And like we get some cool moments, and this dude used like sound magic to combat Noise and was like summoning a disc of piano keys around himself. He was making the like spinning atoms and like spinning electrons of an atom around himself to shoot magic sound at Noise to combat his evil magic sounds. And they do some kind of cool stuff with that deep into the show. It takes a while for Sweet Pretty Cure to get to the parts that are kind of interesting, because I think a lot of the first part of the show is marred by the arguments that Hibiki and Kanade have. It is every episode. It is consistently every episode. It is every time they want to do anything, they are fighting and at each other's throats. And it just drags the entire season down over the whole first little part of it. And it's really frustrating because there's fun stuff later into it. Muse, it doesn't feel like she belongs in the human world because she is a princess from Majorland, is a Pretty Cure who is trying to fight her father because he's possessed by an evil demon from thousands of years ago, or however long Noise has been around. Who knows? For some reason, the main artifact they use to make Majorland happy is a bunch of sheet music that they just have out, I guess. You know, I get setting up a way for the bad guys to kind of come in and get their power running and set the plot in motion. But sure, man, I guess you could do it like that. I don't know if I would. I wouldn't. But Cure Muse feels like she doesn't belong. She is standoffish for a lot of the first part of the show, because she's in a lot of the first part of the show, because she is a little younger than our main girls. She is the best friend of Kanade's younger brother, And she's not mean to him. She's like a little standoffish, a little aloof, but she's not mean to him. She's mean to Kanade and Hibiki constantly. Anytime she sees them, it is on sight. She is out for blood. This child knows no bounds to her wrath. And there's kind of just a switch in her personality after her reveal as Kiramuse. She's still not super not nice to them, but she's hanging out with them. She's not nearly as mean to them. She doesn't, I guess, degrade them. Like, she is so sassy the entire way through. And it is a little funny that they, I guess from their perspective and from the fact that it's a serialized episodic children's television show, it's not obvious that she is Kiramuse, even though none of the rest of their friends act in such a way. Whereas Akko does act standoffish, like the masked version of Kiramuse does. But, you know, you live and you learn, and sometimes your younger brother's best friend, who's really mean to you, is also a magical girl who has been kind of punching you every now and then, but also punching bad guys when you are desperate for help. And that happens several times. They get their butts beat quite a bit in the show. They get kicked around and thrown around, and I kind of like the antagonist's monsters' designs. I don't care for Trio the Miners' designs. They are kind of goofy odd looking, but the negatones are pretty cool. I just wish they were called something else. The name is fine on its own until it comes to the part of the show where the monster is yelling only part of their name. You can figure that one out on your own, but it's pronounced differently, so it's fine, I guess. I don't want to talk about that very much. But they have very cool designs, and I really like that their designs are really reminiscent of Noise once he shows up. Noise is actually kind of an intimidating antagonist. He's a big, like, draconic pterodactyl monster. He's an ancient evil, and he was Bones for a lot of the show because of how incredibly powerful our wizard grandpa was when he beat him 50 years ago. There's a lot of cool stuff going on in Sweet Pretty Cure, and the found family between the Cures, once they actually come together as a group and learn to mesh well and support one another, despite the fact that some of them are not particularly happy with how their lives have gone for the last little while, just because of bad things happening all around them, or because their family kind of sucks, Hibiki. They have some good moments together, and it's really nice seeing that. And I think that Sweet Pretty Cure tries to have a more mature take on the series, and I don't think it always manages to do that. And that's okay, because it's trying. But, it's good. It's good sometimes. It's still worth a watch. I wouldn't say it's not my favorite season. Not even in the top 5, 10. How many have I watched to this point? More than 5. Less than 10. 6. It's like the 8th one. I don't remember. But it's good. It's okay. It's not bad. It's not a bad season. It's just not my favorite. It's not the best one. I'm sure a lot of people really like it. And I think that it does some interesting stuff to try to get drama different than the other shows going. I like that the Pretty Cures are fighting with one another at first. I wish there was a way to do that while also balancing out the fact that 9 times out of 10, the Pretty Cures need to immediately work together to actually beat the bad guys. I wish that there was a balance to that was greater in this season. Where some of the later seasons do a little bit of that. I get a little bit of that, a little taste of it in Happiness Charge, but not as much. That's for later. But Sweet Pretty Cure is pretty good. It's okay. I think it's like a 6 out of 10, honestly. It's not bad. It's not the worst, but it's just okay. It's all right.